at Old Trafford, with Hampshire struggling at 206 for 6.
BBC Radio Manchester, satellite weather with Diane Oxbury.
Well, if you've been waiting for summer, it looks like it has arrived today. There is already plenty of sunshine around. Temperatures in the overnight period were up at 15 degrees, so it's a mild start to the day, and the temperatures shoot up. A little bit of high cloud coming in this afternoon, so the sunshine might turn weaker and more hazy, but your top temperature, 26 Celsius.
You know I'm back when you get them nice little bits of silence between everything, don't you?
Have lunch with Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Well, it's all buttons and dials. It really is. Are you all right? Belting. Here's me then, back again. I don't know when my next holiday is. I ought to, really. You ought to have something to look forward to. And when you've got an holiday coming, you're thinking, oh, a few more weeks, I'll be doing that. A few more weeks, I'll be doing that. And then it doesn't happen, does it? You come back and there's nothing. There's just a great space of nothingness. En route. Anyway, good morning. Good lunchtime. Hello, good afternoon. Another day gone. Are you all right? What would you like to talk about today? Because, frankly, I've not a clue what's going on. We've got a new chief constable, so we're keeping him away from the mountains and the gin bottle, obviously. He's going to have an altitude meter on him. And if he goes more than 100 feet above sea level, an alarm will go off and helicopters will start looking for him. Well, you can't be too careful. Apparently he's a very nice man. We've spoken to him a couple of times, sat here, because he was formerly, and in fact probably still is, really, if he's not yet took up the post. Anyway, formerly the Chief Constable of Cheshire, or is still the Chief Constable of Cheshire, depending. So he'll be good at mountains, really, won't he, Cheshire? Yes. Anyway. What should we say? What we'll say is this. If you'd like to join us, I know you've not had that opportunity in the same way for the past couple of weeks, because you've had Heather and the delightful Becky doing sterling business on my behalf, occupying the seat, sort of between them, a cheek apiece, as it were. No, I didn't call either of them a cheeky piece. I didn't. I said a cheek apiece. It's not the same. Yes, you're going to have to pay more attention. Standards are not being allowed to slip just because I'm back and feeling in a good mood. But if you want to join us, it's the usual process. Telephone number 0161 228 2255. Radio Manchester, this is the email address, radiomanchester@bbc.co.uk. And, of course, one is entitled and empowered and enabled to text merely by, well, choosing to do so. The number for that is 07785 206 951. That's it. No, it's not. It's 07786 206 951. It's just as well I checked. 07786 206 951. And the subject matter is, of course, entirely yours. Personally, I'm not fussed, but I have. Now it's over. There's a sort of little disappointment. It's just like coming back off holiday. There's a little disappointment when it comes to an end, but the joy of moving forward. And I'm a little bit disappointed that the court case of Max Mosley versus the News of the World is over, because it's been such fun, hasn't it, really? Yes, it has. Oh, come on. It's been fun in its sordidness. Its absolute sordidness. The guy is he the chairman? I think he's the chairman of the group of individuals. You see how I'm picking my words carefully? The group of individuals that run Formula One motor racing, which is basically adverts that can kill you, if you think about it. I mean, they nearly did for that English bloke, didn't they? Just a few weeks ago, when he crashed, could have been wiped out. And there's a few have been. So basically, Formula One is just adverts that can kill you. So that's fine. I've no problem with that. They're all volunteers. But does it matter if the chairman of such an organisation has a bit of trouble with his willy? It doesn't, does it? Or does it? You tell me. It's not as if they often talk about role models, but the chairman of Formula One Motorsport, his or her, should it ever fall to a woman, and I suspect it won't, but his or her role itself is something that we ought not to have children aspire to. What do you want to do when you grow up? Oh, I want to sit on me bum doing virtually very little for £6 million a year, watching half-brained cretins race boring motor cars round a wiggly track. Exactly. So the very role that he fulfills, the very place in society that he occupies, is something that we ought to steer, pardon the pun, we ought to steer our children away from. So the fact that he likes having his willy tickled whilst being tied up is of no significance whatsoever, other than to provide people like me with rather more entertainment than the sport is involved in. And whether they were dressed as Nazis or nannies, really, again, it doesn't matter. It's just his hobby. He's got an hobby for his nobby, I suppose you could say. But, yes, I've not thought of it that way before. I may not think of it that way again. But he's got a nobby for his nobby. It doesn't matter, does it? I find the whole thing... Please, I do enjoy the fact that it's all over the papers, but I'm glad he's won his case, because it is not the business of the News of the World, or for that matter, me, what he does with his wedding tattle when he's on his own, or more to the point, when he's not on his own. Fantastic. I've enjoyed the story immensely, and as I say, I'm just sad that it's ended. But I think the court's made the right decision, don't you? I think the jury have come to their senses. Hey, I know, that's a phrase you thought you'd never hear, a jury that's come to its senses. The judge, in his ruling, remarked that it was often said that there is no confidence in iniquity. No idea what that means. But it was highly questionable whether in modern society there a concept which could be applied to sexual activity, fetishist or otherwise, conducted between consenting adults in private. In other words, if consenting adults want to get up to all sorts of things in private, it is their business, and it is no place for the newspapers. Hopefully, at 60,000 quid, the News of the World will consider it money well spent. They'd have preferred to won, but at 60,000 quid, they'll consider it money well spent. It must have done wonders for their circulation. And now I come to think of it, it can't have done us any harm either.
Your Sunday Morning Lion with Mike Shaft.
Where is the Church of England at the moment?
We're in a very difficult position, trying to hold on to people as best we can. And the Church of England somehow has got to hold that tension and find a way forward through debate and discussion.
Mike Shaft.
Why don't more people understand the possibility that faith could have a positive outcome?
The reason we're out every night of the week, come rain or shine, is it's our faith. We're following Christ.
Manchester's faith, spirit, and life's difficult questions with Mike Shaft.
Look at the big picture.
Sunday morning from 7 on BBC Radio Manchester.
Just so as you know, it's me. We're having a bit of trouble with the telephone line, so do please be patient. The number is the same, and if you get a wiggly-waggly noise, then don't worry. And if you get the mumbled sound, or even the explicit sound of our delightful producer Lawrence talking to you, but he's talking to you and saying, "What? Hello? What?" It's because he can't hear you. So we've got a little problem with the phones. We've got a man with a mallet coming, but do keep ringing, please, on 0161 no, not a Timmy mallet, a proper mallet. We don't want a Timmy mallet. That's more scary a countenance than even I can bear. 0161 228 2255. You can still join us via the text. Well, it might be worth giving it a try just in case. 07786 206951. And you can email, as Denise has done, on 0161... No, on Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk, and all she says is, "Welcome back, now get on with the ranting." You see, why do people think I rant? I don't rant. I merely express points of view in a way that doesn't leave much to be desired, and not that much available for discourse, I suppose. Oh, jellyfish! Yeah, I'm not going to tell you any more. There's an organisation inviting people to help in a count of jellyfish. Now, that's not some title bestowed by Her Majesty. You are now the Count of Jellyfish. It's not that. No, it's counting jellyfish. 1, 2, 3, 4, however many there are. And whilst in the south of France, I spent about 18 seconds, which was more than I could bear, listening to something called Riviera Radio. Now, if ever you're in the south of France and you're tempted to listen to Riviera Radio, then frankly, avoid it like the plague. Unless, of course, you like popular music. Yes. And it is indeed full of popular music, so as you can imagine, I hated it. But they did report on Riviera Radio that the whole of the northern Mediterranean coast is being bombarded, attacked, whatever the word might be, by a plague of jellyfish. Hence the relevance of the story. So jellyfish are on the up. Now, I have two questions. The first one is, what is a jellyfish made of? One presumes jelly. Yeah? And are they all stingy? Are there any inert jellyfish? And if they're not, if they do have poisonous tentacles, then how do they mate? they use Max Mosley because he likes that kind of thing. Yes, well, anyway. So how do they meet? Anyway, a very good day to you, Any Road. The world's got... Have you noticed there's a bit more smoking on the telly? There is. In dramas and things, the characters are now smoking. Should I say once again? I suppose I should. But they're now smoking, whereas for a few years we've had nobody smoking on television. And now just one or two characters are smokers. Which I suppose, if you're attempting to be realistic in drama, then some of them do smoke. Even now, people do smoke. But anyway, there you are. Oh, the telephones are now working, apparently. Well, we'll wait and see, should we? But the number's the same, 0161228 2255. The man with the mallet has done his tidy bit. Don't worry about the banging sound. But there's a story on the front page of the Manchester Evening News, and it appears in one or two other papers as well. Youngsters below the age of 18 could be banned from seeing films that show people smoking cigarettes. So, violence, explicit sex, and smoking. And I can think of about 4 jokes there that would be inappropriate even for me. But the films could be given 18 certificates in cinemas, under plans backed by Greater Manchester health chiefs. Now, I don't know. What do you think of that? It's, given some of the things we see in films, smoking surely can't be the worst. Can it? No. I mean, what do you think of that? Should under 18s be permitted to see films where smoking is depicted? And before you rush to an answer, bear in mind that it's perfectly legal. I know the law's only a guideline for life these days. It's not something we give much credence to. But the legal age for smoking is 16. So a 16-year-old would not be able to witness in a film something that he or she would be perfectly entitled to do. The same with sex. A person above the age of 16 is... 16, that was good. A person above the age of 16 is entitled to engage in all kinds of debauchery voluntarily, providing all those involved, or both involved, or even if he or she's just on their own with a carrot. The truth is, one is entitled to engage in those things. So they could even, provided they could save up enough money, go and have a bit of rumpy-pumpy with people with sticks in the Max Mosley form. They could do that, providing they're not paying by credit card, obviously, because they're only 16. So they're entitled to engage in the most debauched of sexual activities, but they wouldn't be entitled, indeed they're not entitled, to watch it on television, or indeed in a film. Now, violence is a different matter, isn't it? Violence, nobody is entitled to engage in violence against another person, except perhaps Ricky Hatton, and only then, in very privileged circumstances. So, violence against another person is a criminal offence at whatever age. So I suppose the arbitrary age of 18, adulthood, is a good place to put the regulation, as it were, a good cut-off point. But why prevent youngsters, people generally, but why prevent youngsters from witnessing others do that which they can legally do? Now, by all means, outlaw tobacco products. I won't change my life at all. I have to pay a bit more tax, but that's a small price to pay. But outlaw them by all means. But until they're outlawed, surely children at 16 and above should be entitled to watch a film with somebody having a woodbine in it. Doesn't make sense that they're not. But there you are. It's just the strange world, isn't it? Anyway, it's 12:20. We better get the news headlines and stuff from Faye Rusco.
The head of World Motorsport, Max Mosley, has won his privacy case against the News of the World, which had claimed he'd taken part in a Nazi-style orgy with prostitutes. A man's been charged after more than 80 realistic imitation guns were seized during a raid in Salford. And the electricity company E.ON says you're wasting power by leaving appliances plugged in and on standby while you jet off on holiday. Manchester's weather warm and sunny, highs of 26 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Well, if you're travelling around the Manchester area at the moment on the M56 on the westbound carriageway, be aware that there's problems at the moment. The westbound has been closed off because of an accident between junction 6 at Hale Four Seasons and 7 at Bowden. Now, there was an incident there earlier on. It was quickly cleared of the carriageway, but nonetheless, air ambulance is attending the scene, which also means that the eastbound stretch is closed between 7 Bowden and 6 Hale Four Seasons. Traffic's quickly starting to queue in the area. It was already fairly heavy anyway because of people making their way to the Tatton show. So if you are heading to the show, I'm afraid you may well meet up with delays and you need to find yourself an alternative route in the meantime. Taking a look to the Bolton area, Trinity Street still closed off because of a serious fire that happened in the early hours of this morning between Newport Street, Tyne Street and Bradshire. It's also affecting Bradshire between Great Moor Street and Lower Bridgman Street. Now, don't forget, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
Decongesting Manchester, one car at a time. 2020 traffic.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Isn't it interesting that Anglicans believe in God but they don't believe in fairies? Ho-ho! Hey! I enjoyed that. Yeah, but hundreds... I didn't know there were hundreds. How many bishops are there, for crying out loud? Anyway, such is hundreds... Aye, it is. Hundreds of bishops... Yeah. Listen, would I make something up? Never. Hundreds of bishops have marched on London. Yeah. That's an awful lot of crooks. No, crooks. Them Hey, do you know how much they are? Oh, blimey, you wouldn't believe how much they are. You know them sticks with the Yukon that bishops have? They've got a proper name. I don't know what it is. Does anyone know? There was an advert for them. I kid you not. There was an advert for them in one of the papers when I was away. So whether it was in the English... They were English papers, like the Mail and the Express and all that. You could get them in France. But there was an advert. It might have been the Telegraph. I think it probably was. The French printed version of the Telegraph. But because all the bishops are in town... round here. Well, not round here, but London, you know. All the bishops are in town. And there was an advert for their crooks. You know the stick with the Yukon that they gather fish with, or whatever it's called, or they change water into wine, or whatever the hell it is they do. But the sticks. And there was an advert for them. And you can get all sorts. When you get given your bishop prick, and I'm not using that gag again, but when you get given the bishop prick, you have to buy a red hat and a big red frock, don't you? And did they do rosary beads? I can't remember. Anyway, all sorts of regalia. It's called a crozier. Thank you, Barry in Middleton. But there was an advert for bishops' croziers. Yeah, I thought that was how you made... I thought that was how you made doilies. Or is that crozier? That's crocus. No, it's not crocus. What's that? Croquet. Crocus is a flower. Yeah. Anyway, and there was an advert... And even a wooden one is 800 quid. 800 quid! For a bishop's stick. And you have to say that carefully. 800 quid. Now, that's a lot of suppers for somebody poor, is that? So, every bishop, providing he's only got one, every bishop, or bishopess, if it goes pear-shaped, every bishop, when he gets made up to being a bishop, or every priest that gets made up to being a bishop, has to buy one of these sticks, otherwise they fall over. And the last thing you want is a bishop falling over. Yeah, because he'd get bashed, and you don't want a bashed bishop. Anyway, so, what? So, what? You don't want him getting hurt. So, there he is, with his stick, which I pronounce emphatically and carefully once again. There he is with his stick with the hook on. 800 quid was the cheapest one. And that was the wooden one. They had silver uns and gold uns and all sorts. And I just, dear God, which I thought was an appropriate thought. Dear God, I thought. All that money on a stick? I'll sell him a stick for a lot less than that. I could whittle one down. Or up, because it has to be a long un. Dear God, why do they cost that much? And the answer is, of course, because bishops are rich, and they can afford for them to cost that much. And in any event, it's probably a bit like the MPs. They probably get it on expenses. Let me have a look at your expenses. 3 croziers a year. They probably have a ration. The Inland Revenue has a ration. You're allowed 2 croziers a year, unless you can prove that your crozier's been stolen. How you insure a crozier, I don't know. Could you imagine a bishop claiming for a stolen crozier? Not a damaged one. It's like, I've got this crozier. Oh, well, I used to have this crozier, but I haven't got it anymore. There he is, talking to the Rip-em-off insurance company. I used to have a crozier, and it was struck by lightning, and it's gone. Why am I talking like Tommy Cooper? I've no idea. My crozier has been hit by lightning, and it's gone. Well, we're not paying out. I need £800 to replace me hit by lightning crozier. And the insurance company says, we're not paying out. Why not? I look at my policy. It's in date. I've paid the premiums. Here's my policy number. I've got all that. I'm covered. I've got new for old and all the rest of it. Why aren't you paying me for the lightning strike on my crozier? And they say to the bishop, because, sir, it was an act of God. Ho-ho!
Making sense every lunchtime. Allan Beswick and you.
BBC Radio Manchester.
I don't know how I got into that, but I will go back to the story and hope I am not distracted. I'm going to talk to Carl in a minute, but hundreds of Anglican bishops from around the world have taken part in a march in central London, calling on governments to keep their promises on aid and development. They warned that the international community is not on target to meet the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, which are intended to halve global poverty by 2015. Gordon Brown, our Prime Minister, addressed the demonstrators and thanked them for their work in fighting global poverty, and then said, turn in all your croziers and use the money for the good of man. Well, no, but if he'd have thought of it, he would, I'm sure. 0161 228 2255. Carl in St Helens. Hiya, Carl.
Hi, Mr. Beswick, you all right?
I'm very well, sir.
Well, do you think they'll turn in Adam Crozier as well?
If they do, there'll be 1 or 2 people pleased, but go on.
Excuse me, I was down in the local TA barracks last week talking to the paras about an event I'm organising. And the paras said they're doing a jump in Arnhem in September. I think it's going to be the week commencing the weekend of the 6th and the 7th.
Yeah, I thought they did that every year.
Oh, did they do it every year? All right.
I thought they did, but go on anyway.
Well, it was just basically about that, really, just a bit of info for you, because I thought you might be interested, or obviously your father might be interested anyway.
Well, I think he's probably aware of it, because I'm sure they do it every year. In fact, there was one bloke who, a couple of years ago now, maybe it was last year, one bloke who actually jumped at Arnhem, as it were, fought at Arnhem, and he went on and did a jump in one of these annual, if they are annual, but one of these drops at September, because September was when Arnhem took place, of course.
That's right.
And he did it because he must have been 80 plus by then. He did it as one of them tandem jumps, you know, when they go down on a bike.
Yeah.
the strapped to the proper bloke. Yeah, so yeah, there was a fella 80 odd did one. I think it was last year, it may have been the year before.
That's fantastic. I'd love to do a parachute jump, especially a free fall.
Well, you can. I mean, they're all free fall now. They don't do static lines and all that anymore. Them are gone. But what you need to do it for charity.
Yeah, well, I do a lot for charity anyway.
Well, do that.
Yeah, once I've got... I'm involved with a project at the moment, so once I've got that out, I think I will do. It's probably going to be late 2009 now, I think.
Yeah, well, you see adverts in magazines and newspapers from time to time. In fact, there's one every week in the Big Issue. So if you get a copy, I'm plugging the Big Issue because I'm involved in it. But
well, I'd have suggested that anyway.
Yeah, but there's one in the Big Issue, and various charities do it. Mind, which is a charity I'm very much in favour of, do it, but others do as well. Some of the children's charities, and you go along, you do the parachute jump, you raise the money, you pay for the jump yourself, and then the profit that's made from that, the money that's raised, goes to the charity of your choice. So there's loads do it.
Yeah, there's a lot doing the Inca Trails and the Great Wall of China as well now, isn't there?
Yeah, there are, yeah. Trekking for charity. Yeah, I suppose it's a way, isn't it, really?
It's trying to generate interest.
It's better than getting a load of bishops parading around London, surely.
Anything's better than that.
Surely, to goodness, yeah. Good on you, Carl.
All right, no worries.
Well, thanks for letting me know. Thank you very much, and I hope it all goes well for them. Have you done a parachute jump? What's it like? What's that moment like when you're in the plane and you're just sort of standing or sitting there or wherever it is, and you know, the first one, you know that in 3 minutes' time, 2 minutes' time, 1 minute's time, 5 seconds' time, you're going to be jumping out of the blessed thing. What's that like? And what's the sensation? Is it worth the effort? 0161 228 2255. On the email, radiomanchester@bbc.co.uk, Norman says, welcome back. I'm sorry, a lot has happened since you went away on your holidays, so I'll have to wrap this up too. I've litter to pick up and graffiti to remove. Only joking. I know it's amazing just how much can happen in 2 weeks. Thought, do you think Mr. Brown waited for you to slope off before introducing more daft ideas? I'm on me Todd here, but it's nice to have you back. Norman, thank you very much indeed. I presume you're referring to James Pennell's idea. James Pennell, of course, one of our MPs, but he's the Minister for making sure the poor get bugger all. I don't think that's his proper title, but I think that's practically what it is. The Minister of keeping the rich rich and the poor poor. Anyway, you know, you've got to fill your weekends somehow when you're not buying furniture on the state, haven't you? But anyway, so I don't know whether Pennell does, by the way. I have no idea, but all the others do, bar about 10. But they've decided that you're going to have to work in order to get your benefits. So when you've been unemployed and out of work for a year, if you want benefit, you're going to have to work for it. Now, from that point of view, it sounds eminently sensible. It sounds, well, that's fantastic. What a sensible idea. Until you think, well, hang on a minute, what work are they going to do? Well, what they're going to do is they're going to pick up Chewy and all that sort of stuff. Well, if they do that, what are the bad lads going to do? You know, the bad lads at the moment are doing that kind of work instead of going to jail. Bad lads, well, they're not doing it, but they, you know, exactly. But there they are, not guilty of anything in the most cases, except being unable to get a job. Huh? Yeah, quite. So accept that. But they're going to be doing the same work that currently you get if you beat the crap out of an elderly lady and take her pension book. Now, that means Pennell, and he's big enough and ugly enough to speak for himself, and I know he wants to be Prime Minister one day, but why would you be a politician if you didn't? But it would appear that James Pennell believes that being unemployed is as offensive to society as kicking the crap out of an old lady. Now, frankly, I hope he's misguided, because if he actually believes that, then all is lost. If a senior member of the so-called Labour Party believes that kicking the crap out of an old lady is of equal harm to our society as not being able to find a job, well, that's what we're talking about, isn't it? Isn't it? What else? Will you explain to me? Look, I understand the lazy, idle, good-for-nothings who don't want to work and understand the system. They are, frankly, they deserve to be punished. They deserve to have their benefit withdrawn. But I don't know any way of distinguishing between the lazy, idle, good-for-nothing who won't work and the poor schmuck who is desperate to work but can't actually find a suitable job or a job at all. Now, if you can find a way of distinguishing between those two, and if Purnell can explain to me a way of, or the civil servants that gave him the idea in the first place can explain a way of distinguishing between those two, then we maybe have the makings of a decent policy here. But in the meantime, we're stuck with this idea that James Purnell believes that kicking the crap out of an old lady in order to get her pension book, which is punishable by working for society, cleaning off graffiti and all that, the kind of work that the bad lads do, is exactly the same offence to society as not actually having a job for a year. Unless, of course, I've misunderstood the policy, which is always possible. David says, Alan, never mind all this knife crime in London. David Cameron has had his bike stolen. I think his chauffeur could be in hot water. Can he claim for a new bike on his MP's expenses? Yeah. Yes, his chauffeur may well be in trouble, mightn't he? I don't think it was stolen when he was on it. Oh, you can hope, can't you? But I don't think his bicycle was stolen whilst he was on it. I think it was stolen as it was chained to a railing somewhere. I think they should have I think they should have left the bike and chained him to the railings. It would have given all a bit of entertainment. Chris in Southport said, Alan, please don't bash the bishop. You'll get complaints. The bash the bishops. Sorry, it's an entirely different... I don't know what he means. 01612282255. If you'd like to join us, you may. And there's very little you can't talk about. Alan, there is no legislation to prevent the under-16s from smoking. Not that I recommend it, he says, Ron. But the law only prevents them from purchasing tobacco, not using it. Well, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct in that. But it was very difficult, apparently, to frame legislation whereby they were prohibited from using tobacco. Because even if they didn't light up, if they were sat in the same room as somebody that did, they would unfortunately be in that way. Welcome back home, says Mandy. Thank you. Next time you intend buggering off, will you have a word with Jeremy McVine, as he was off at the same time? Well, it's no great loss, which makes me think you did it intentionally. He's a lot easier on the ear and the eye, and speaks the Queen's perfect English, and doesn't swear. Well, there you are. Yeah, but he's a big girl's blouse, isn't he? I mean, for God's sake, he's not real, is he? Can't be. And regards smoking in films, Teddy Moston as no surprise at his view, given that he's a smoker. This country is getting ridiculous. Under 18s see people smoking every day. There's an American talk show host called Michael Savage who believes liberalism is a mental disorder. I think he's right. Teddy Moston, thank you very much indeed. How is liberalism a mental disorder? And if liberalism is a mental disorder, well, the past 7 days have taught us that James Purnell is perfectly sane. Make of that what you will. 01612282255, Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk, and of course you can text on 07786 206 951. The best headline in a newspaper today is in the Sun newspaper, and it's the bloke, you know, the bloke that disappeared, and everybody believed, and for a little while I believe Mrs. Bloke what disappeared believed the same thing. I'm talking about the canoe man. I'm a canoe. Yeah. Well, the canoe death con man, John Darwin, and his wife Anne each got more than 6 years jail yesterday for a deception which shocked the world. And the judge slammed their cruelty towards their 2 sons who believed their dad was dead. In fact, he'd plotted a new life in Panama using £250,000 in insurance and pension payouts. And as the report says, they were both sent to jail. And what does the Sun put as its headline on the front page to attract your attention to this story? Well, what else could they put? Shock and awe. O-A-R, you see. Paddling your own canoe. Get it? So did I. Shock and awe. How fantastic is that? And then Batman star Christian Bale allegedly assaulted his mum and sister during a row over money. The multimillionaire Bale is said to have gone berserk after he was asked to lend 100,000 quid to his sister. Good Lord. 100. Could just lend us... kid, couldn't lend us £100,000, could you? I'm a bit short this week. It's 20 to 1, the news headlines and sport, but we start with the headlines and Faye Roscoe.
The head of World Motorsport, Max Mosley, has won his privacy case against the News of the World. The judge awarded him £60,000 in damages. A team of fire investigators are assessing the scene of a blaze in Bolton earlier this morning. The building on Bradshawgate will have to be demolished later today. And £5 million of council money is being invested in an animation studio and digital media village to be built at the site of the former Sharp Electronics factory in East Manchester. Manchester's weather warm and sunny, highs of 26 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Well, I'm afraid that traffic on the M56 is still affected by these closures because of an accident that originally happened on the westbound carriageway between 6 at Hale, Four Seasons, and 7 at Bowden. Now, the accident was quickly cleared to the hard shoulder, but air ambulance is having to attend the scene, which is the reason for the closures that have been implemented either side of the carriageway. Now, as I've been saying all morning, really, traffic's already busy in the area due to people making their way to the flower show at Tatton Park. Now, the Highways Agency are asking motorists for the moment to stay in their vehicles, so please do try and heed that advice. Aside from that, though, other routes around the Manchester area not doing too badly. The M60 moving fairly freely, thankfully, between junction 18 at Sinister all the way around to 26 Bredbury clockwise and anti-clockwise. So again, if you're heading that way, you should have a clear run, but it's once you get onto the M56, I'm afraid, that you will be slowed down. Don't forget, if you can update me further, make sure you give us a call if you can on the travel line, which is 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
Good afternoon. Well, Manchester City fans can feel a lot more relaxed this lunchtime with the news that Michael Johnson will be staying at Eastlands. Manager Mark Hughes has revealed he hasn't received any inquiries about the youngster despite speculation linking him with a move away from the club, and he wants Johnson to remain with City. He says the player is close to agreeing a new long-term deal. Manchester United midfielder Paul Scholes has revealed he plans to retire from football in 2 years' time. Scholes, who has 1 year left on his current contract, is hoping to be offered another 12-month deal at Old Trafford. Stockport manager Jim Gannon has told BBC Radio Manchester that fans can expect more signings before the new season gets underway. County wrapped up deals with strikers Peter Thompson and Carl Baker earlier this week.
I spoke to the board at length, and we've been able to add a little bit with Ashley Williams going and Liam Dickinson going. I've asked the club to back me and strengthen it. I think the fans, myself, the staff, the players all deserve to have a really good squad going into this season, and I think we will. So we're looking for 2 or 3 more signings in the coming weeks, maybe another centre forward or a attacking midfielder, and maybe we'll have to strengthen a goalkeeper because we only have one at the moment.
Alder manager John Sheridan has added to his squad with the signing of Kevin Maher from Southend. The 31-year-old has put pen to paper on a 1-year deal at Boundary Park. Well, Lancashire were quick to dismiss the Hampshire top order this morning, but they'll be wanting to do the same to the tail-enders. Chris Malaband is keeping across proceedings at Old Trafford.
The Red Rose County certainly on top here after a good morning's work from Dominic Cork and Gary Keady. 227 for 7 now, Hampshire, so they still trail by 130 runs. David Balcom's on 4, Dimitri Mascarenas is on 25, but it's been Lancashire's morning with Dominic Cork to the 4. He removed Michael Brown, LBW 476. The Burnley-born man adding just 1 to his overnight score, and then Nick Pothas went in the same over when he looped to catch up to Vincent, again off the bowling of Cork. Pothas not troubling the scorers. Then Gary Keady got in on the act, getting Chris Benham out, caught by Stuart Law at slip for 89, and then that man Cork was in the action again as Chris Tremlett drove Keady to deep mid-off. Cork diving low took an excellent catch in front of him. So Lancashire have had a good morning's work here at Old Trafford. They're well and truly on top now. Hampshire 228 for 7.
Looking pretty good then for Lancs. We'll keep you updated throughout the day, of course. England need James Anderson at his best to beat South Africa. That's according to Lancashire's Andrew Flintoff. England trail 1-0 in the series with 2 tests to play. And Flintoff feels Anderson's bowling could be vital.
Jim is a class act. He came into the side as a young lad and performed and had instant success, and then didn't find it too easy after that. And then the past 18 months or so, we've seen Jimmy Anderson grow. I think people forget he's still only 25 or 26, but he's a class performer, and we're going to need the likes of him and Peterson and Bell and Vaughan and myself next week if we've got any aspirations of winning the series 2-1.
Britain's head diving coach Steve Foley says that 14-year-old Tom Daley must be handled carefully if he's not to burn out. Foley says there are no guarantees that the teenager who will be at Beijing next month will be around to compete at the London Olympics in 4 years' time. But Tom's father, Rob, says they're prepared for whatever happens in his son's career.
There's a lot of sports science, sports psychology around. We know what we're doing now. He knows what he's doing. There's a brilliant support system behind him, so he's just got to carry on as he's going along and keep his feet on the ground and just carry on doing what we're doing, really. I mean, we do guide him. We tell him, he's going to want to start going out soon and this and that. And we'll say to him, yeah, don't go down here, don't do this, don't get involved with that. And just tell him, you don't want to throw it all away.
Finally, the Super League franchises will once again be top of the agenda on tonight's Rugby League Hour from 7. Joining Jack Dearden and Phil Kinsella in the studio are RFL executive Craig Spence and Rugby League lawyer Rod Finlay. As always, let us know your views on the week's news.
Rugby League's got a lawyer?
To show at the RHS Flower Show at Tatton Park, you need to know as much about making use of your city space as you do your lengthy lawns. How to sow a sumptuous garden on a big budget or on a shoestring. And how contemporary design can complement more traditional tastes. Only the most innovative talent can take centre stage. It's showtime. The RHS Flower Show at Tatton Park starts tonight at 8:30 on BBC Two.
I'm not going this year to the RHS Flower Show at Tatton. I've been to every one since it started. I'm not going this year because last year was naff. The first one was absolutely brilliant. The second one was all right. Last year's, I'm sorry, was naff. And the reason it was naff is because all the top gardeners that go to Chelsea and all that, they don't bother now at Tatton. They don't because they can't be bothered. It's up to them why they don't, but they can't. I don't think it is. I don't think it's anything like as good as it used to be, so I'm not going to be wasting my time. And frankly, I don't have to waste my money because I get in for now. Diane Oxbury from Breakfast thinks it was absolutely brilliant. Raved about it. Well, so what? I still think it was naff last year. Now, they might have got it right this year. This year it might be absolutely fantastic. Diane might be right. I won't find out because I won't be going unless someone's prepared to pay me to go. I won't be going because, frankly, it was naff. And that's not having a go at Tatton or the RHS. It's just a shop now. It's just an open-air shop. You go and there's hundreds and hundreds. You can buy 35... identical hose pipes from 35 different suppliers. And frankly, that's not a garden show, it's a shop. Anyway, it's getting on for you. If you've been, or if you're going, yeah. Becky liked it too, so there you are. I'm outnumbered by 2 women. God bless us and save us, that's not a first, is it? Tony in Droylsden. Hiya.
Hi, Alan. I just wanted to ask a question. Greater Manchester Police have put a mobile police station in Piccadilly, and it closes at 10 o'clock at night, which, first of all, I think is pointless, because that's when there's more problems in the centre. There's large groups of African and various other nations of people sitting in the area at night, which is intimidating people. They're smoking marijuana and everything after 10 o'clock at night there, and the police are nowhere in sight. And I'm thinking, what the hell's the point of this police station being there? It's not even got police officers in it. It's got community support officers in till 10 o'clock at night, and then they're gone. And when the problems are there, they're not there. What the hell's going on?
Well, the first thing is the noddy bobbies wouldn't be able to solve the problems because they're just paid to walk about and look like the coppers from a distance. We all know they don't do out.
Yeah.
They're just poor man's coppers for... Well, that's what they are, coppers for coppers, you might say. Whether people sitting around smoking marijuana ought to be intimidating, I would say that was the least intimidated thing, because they're all sitting there going, man, this is cool. Heavy.
About 40 of them. My wife walks across Piccadilly Gardens after 10 o'clock at night. She's actually walking round the area now because she feels intimidated walking through the gardens because of this large group of about 30, 40 people that gather every single night. Now, I was down there on Monday night, and I was choking on the bloody stuff, the marijuana. You could smell it. And the police were there, or the community, you know, the noddy bobbies were there, and they were doing nothing about it.
Well, we mustn't express our disappointment that the noddy bobbers didn't do anything. They don't do anything. They're not there to do anything. They're there to convince you that the police are on the streets when the police are not. They're a cheap way of conning you, thinking you're an idiot. They're a cheap way of conning you into believing that there are cops there. We all know they're not cops. We all know they're not there. So, but the thing I've got difficulty with in what you say is the idea that people smoking dope is threatening. People hitting you with a billiard ball in a sock's threatening. Somebody sitting there smoking dope, I can't see the threat in that, to be
I
honest.
accept that, but the shouting abuse at the women when they're walking past and that.
Right, well, that's
intimidating for women when they're walking past on their own.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's an entirely different matter. An entirely different matter if people are physically being intimidated. If people are being attacked in that way, verbally, then yes, the coppers ought to be doing something about it.
Why? But they're nowhere in sight.
Well, indeed they are not, and I don't know the answer to that other than a change in the way the police work and a change in the way, or an increase in the amount by which they are funded. Maybe it'll change when we get our new all-singing, all-dancing Chief Constable who's just been appointed, which is this guy in Cheshire, or formerly of Cheshire, I suppose, but Peter Farr's been named as Chief Constable of Greater Manchester in succession to Michael Todd, so maybe he'll make a difference. But what do you want to see? What do you think the police should be doing at that time of night?
I think they should be showing a presence on the street, not driving round in cars. They should be in the centre of the city. I'm proud of Manchester. I'm a Mancunian. I'm proud of my city. But at night, when I see this going on, I'm ashamed of it. I want police presence there to, you know, at least disperse these people, stop them doing what they're doing or whatever, do something about it. But they're not doing anything, they're not even there.
They're not even there. Well, Peter Farr, he starts in November. Perhaps there'll be a change in direction. Maybe the people who are currently enjoying his power, the people of Cheshire, will tell us what he's been like as a Chief Constable for them. But you're not alone in your appeal. Let me ask you a dead straight question. And there are 1,000 different answers to this, but one of them is yes and one of them is no, and all the others are irrelevant. Would you be prepared to pay more tax if it guaranteed, if you like, a corresponding increase in the number of coppers on the street?
Yes.
You would?
Yes, I would.
You would pay good money to get more coppers?
To feel for my wife to cross over the city safely or walk through the area safely, yes, I would.
Good on you. Cheers, Tony.
All right, thanks very much, Alan, anyway.
Tony says, what's the point of a mobile cop shop if it's not manned when the baddies are about, as it were? It's a good question, isn't it? I don't know what it's there to do, other than, presumably, to give the noddy bodies somewhere to hide out of the rain, because we don't want the poor souls getting rained on. Brian says, Alan, you drew a comparison between a mugger who, quote, beats the crap out of an old lady and gets community service picking up litter, to that of new proposals to compel the out of work to do the same thing. Well, the same could be said of someone whose job it is to pick up litter. How fair is it that they do a job which is considered to be punishment for offenders, as well as possibly the out of work? As you say quite often, Alan, nothing in life is ever fair. To be quite honest, regarding their proposals, as for so many of their initiatives, it won't happen, but does succeed in grabbing a headline. Brian, thank you very much indeed. And, well, there have been a lot of headlines that haven't yet turned into policies. For that, we are absolutely certain. With regards to those who pick up litter for a living, it's a perfectly honourable job, and they get paid for it. The thing here, of course, will be that the bad lads don't get paid for it. The punishment is being required to do menial, because it's menial whether you do it for a living or not. Menial's not, in my view, an offensive word, but they're being required to do menial work without pay. That's the element that's the punishment, if you like. And the unemployed will be doing it without pay, in that they will get their unemployment benefit, but that's not pay. That is society's way of enabling them, if you like, to survive in times when they wouldn't otherwise be entitled to survive. In other words, when they haven't got a job. So I'm not drawing the parallel that the work itself is horrible. The work itself is not horrible. The work is perfectly honourable, along with many other menial tasks. But if we... I mean, the other side of that coin, which you didn't touch on, but I'm sure you thought of, Brian, is that I can see local authorities at some point in the future deciding they don't need to employ as many street cleaners and graffiti removers because, well, that's all right, the unemployed will do it. You can't avoid it. If I was a local authority and I knew that the local courts, or indeed James Purnell at the Dole office, were going to give me a large supply of individuals to do menial work, then frankly I wouldn't bother employing people to do that menial work. I might have one or two engaged to train them how to scrub stuff off walls or how to pick up litter or whatever. But I wouldn't engage every one of the ones I'm engaging now, because I'd just be chucking money away. You wouldn't pay to get a job done that the government's going to give you somebody to do it for free. That's for certain. And I suppose your council taxpayers would be glad of it. On the subject of television programmes for the young at heart, Pam and Pete, I know not which, but one of them, possibly both in unison, say, "Dear Alan, Popeye the sailor smoked." He did indeed, he smoked a pipe. "I never saw it smoking, but he always had one in his cake hole. Tom and Jerry was the most violent programme on television. Yogi Bear was the biggest thief of picnic baskets, and steady. And Captain Pugwash had a very shady past. Tell the powers that be, to get a life." I'm afraid Pam, Pete, or even Pam and Pete, maybe it's just one name, maybe that's your name, maybe your parents had a sense of humour, I've no idea. But Pam and Pete, first of all, you sound like a couple of characters out of Captain Pugwash, to be honest, but Pam and Pete, I have to say, the whole idea of those in high office getting a life is balmy. It's not going to happen. Colin in Bolton, with reference to the unemployed working for their benefits, an important distinction that you might like to consider is that they will be paid for the work they do. However, the criminals will not be paid, as they'll be working as a punishment. It's a matter of contributing to society rather than a punishment. Well, yes, they will be paid. Of course they will. But by whom? By whom? By the unemployed people? Will they, by the unemployment office? Will they be paid the going rate for the job? Will they be paid the minimum wage? Or will they simply be given their benefit in return for work? Because if they'll be given their benefit in return for work, they'll all be paid a different rate of pay, because the benefits are different according to the circumstances of the recipient. So they'll all be paid a different rate of pay. The benefits at the moment wouldn't constitute enough in many cases, I don't know about most, but wouldn't constitute enough to be the minimum wage. So there's that as well. The fact is that the idea of forced work for those who have been the long-term unemployed, and many of them, of course, will be people on disability benefits of one kind or another. The idea of requiring people to work to get their benefit simply negates the concept of benefit. And if that's what we want as a society, then fine. Let's do away with the National Health Service. Let's do away with unemployment benefit. Let's do away with retirement pension. All those wrinklies sitting round sucking money out of our pockets just so they can eat and drink and make merry. Let's do away with the law. Let the devil take the hindmost, because frankly, I'll be all right, thank you very much.
hard times? Don't worry, be happy. Manchester Business, tonight from 6. BBC Radio Manchester.
Welfare state indeed. Join the Labour Party and all work together. We in on the welfare state. We don't want it anymore. You want money off us? Work, you lazy, idle, good for nothing. Get out of our country otherwise. Go on!
95.1 FM.
DAB Digital Radio.
And the World Wide Web.
This is Manchester.
BBC Radio Manchester.
At 1 o'clock, Max Mosley wins his privacy case and £6,000 and a warning to burglars across Greater Manchester.
Hughes says Johnson is staying at City.
Well, this afternoon is going to be dry, warm, and we'll see some sunshine at times. Top temperatures 25 Celsius.
And if you're travelling on the M56 on the eastbound carriageway at the moment, then be aware that just one lane is closed off now. That follows on from a full closure east and westbound in light of an earlier accident. Air ambulance have now left the scene. Nonetheless, traffic still heavy east and westbound. And of course, people are heading to the RHS Flower Show, so do make sure you allow yourself plenty of extra journey time.
Good afternoon, I'm Faye Rusco. The head of World Motorsport, Max Mosley, has won his privacy case against the News of the World. He was suing the newspaper for breach of privacy after it alleged he took part in an orgy that had a Nazi theme. Today, a judge awarded the Formula One boss £60,000 in damages. Mr Mosley says he feels vindicated.
It demonstrates that their Nazi lie was completely invented and had no justification. It also shows that they had no right to go into private premises and take pictures and films of adults engaged in activities which are no one's business but those of the people concerned.
Meanwhile, the legal expert Joshua Rosenberg says newspaper editors will have to sit up and take notice of today's ruling.
I think it is a warning. I suppose that newspaper editors might have calculated that if they are revealing facts which are truly embarrassing, then the people whose privacy is invaded simply won't go to court and challenge it. But here is proof that somebody did and has won.
A man's been charged after more than 80 realistic imitation guns were seized during a raid in Salford. Police and trading standards took part in the operation to target the G3 Toys store on Rugby Street yesterday. 19-year-old Abdul Rahami from Monica Avenue in Crumpsall is due before magistrates in Salford next month. A team of fire investigators are assessing the scene of a blaze in Bolton earlier this morning. The building on Bradshire will have to be demolished later today after a fire ripped through a hairdresser's, a stationery shop and a martial arts centre which were based there. It's not yet known how the fire started. Road closures are still in place. 4 men have been arrested after a double stabbing during a fight in Salford. Police were called to Liverpool Road in the early hours of this morning to find 4 people injured. One had a broken arm and had been stabbed in the chest. Another had been stabbed 3 times in the back, while the other 2 had cuts and bruises. Burglars are being targeted in a day of action by Greater Manchester Police. The number of burglaries is falling, but around 60 homes are still broken into every day. Today, police are visiting suspected criminals at home and patrolling hotspots. This convicted burglar, who's serving a 3-year sentence at a jail here in the northwest, says it's easy to stop people like him targeting you.
Be more security conscious, get a decent alarm, decent bolts on the doors, them security locks. Don't leave your car keys on show. People still do it. You can fish them out, stick with a hook on or whatever.
An animation studio and digital media village is to be built at the site of the former Sharp Electronics factory in East Manchester. The City Council's to invest £5 million in the project. The move is part of Manchester's response to losing out to Salford on the relocation of the BBC. And there's been a big fall in high street spending. Retail sales were down nearly 4% in June compared with a month before. They're the weakest figures since 1986.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
Manchester City manager Mark Hughes has confirmed midfielder Michael Johnson will stay at the club despite speculation linking him with a move away from Eastlands. Hughes has revealed that he has not yet received any inquiries for Johnson and that he hopes to tie the 20-year-old to a new long-term contract. Older manager John Sheridan has added to his squad with the signing of midfielder Kevin Maher from Southend. Lancashire still have a healthy first innings lead over Hampshire in the County Championship. With news of day 3 so far at Old Trafford, here's Chris Malaband.
Lunch on day 3, Hampshire 235 for 7. It's been Lancashire's morning and no mistake. Only 61 runs have come off 32 overs and Lancashire have taken 4 wickets. 2 each for Cork and Keady. Cork's also taken a wonderful catch as the Red Rose have really put pressure on their visitors from the south coast. Lunch here at Old Trafford. Lancashire 357. In reply, Hampshire 235 for 7.
Meanwhile, Lancashire's Andrew Flintoff says he's content to bat at number 7 as long as he's back in the England team. The all-rounder knows he has yet to hit form with the bat.
BBC Radio Manchester, satellite weather with Heather Stott.
Well, this afternoon is breezy, but that breeze is coming from the southeast, so it's bringing warm air with it. There is some sunshine around, but there's some cloud around as well, and that cloud will increase at times, so the sunshine is going to be a little bit hazy from time to time. Nevertheless, a warm afternoon with top temperatures of 25 Celsius.
Allan Beswick with you on the phones. 0161 228 2255.
BBC Radio Manchester.
It's going to turn out to be a good thing. Good afternoon to you, yes. 0161 228 2255. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. And the text number is 07786 206 951. But it is, well, it is. It could yet turn out to be a good thing, couldn't it? The credit crunch, as it's being called. Yeah. People are spending less on, well, rubbish, really. An awful lot of rubbish is bought over the years. And high street spending. We're not talking people will stop buying expensive food and buy the cheaper food. They might even, now this is a bit scary, people might even start cooking ingredients again. No, it could happen. Oh, don't laugh at me. It could happen. You've watched it on the telly, so it might really happen. Anyway, Marion in Chadderton. Hiya, Marion.
Hi, Alan. How are you?
I'm very well. What can we do for you?
Good. Can you remember the war?
No.
Oh, what a shame.
I wasn't born.
Oh, you wasn't you?
No, 1948 I was born. They'd given it up.
No, you missed it.
I know. I'm grateful for that. Can you?
Oh, yes, I can remember it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm an old duckling now. Can you tell me, we were provided with air raid shelters.
Yeah.
Some went in the house and looked like a very large steel table.
Were they called the Anderson shelters?
No, the Anderson shelters were the corrugated iron ones that went outside.
Yeah, right.
I think they were called a Morrison shelter for inside.
Yeah.
Now, could you possibly tell me, or settle an argument that my brother and I are having, is did the householders have to pay for those air raid shelters?
Ooh, crumbs.
That's giving you a tough one, hasn't it?
It has, yeah, before me time, as they say. I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know. Do you know, the thought has never crossed my mind, but it's actually an interesting thought, isn't it?
It's very interesting. I'm glad I can baffle you with something.
Well, I'm easily baffled, love. But what side are you on in this discourse, with your argument with your brother?
I said they were supplied.
You were giving them for free?
Yes.
It's a bit worrying if that's true, isn't it, really? You know, that the government actually gave stuff away. I mean, good heavens, what's the world coming to?
Oh, yes,
yeah.
But it was a different world then.
Yeah. Well, I don't know is the answer. I don't know, but I mean, effectively, it was a steel cage, wasn't it? The Morrison shelter.
The Morrison shelter was like a steel table that had steel top, 4 posts at each corner.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it had a full base or whether it was just sort of bars that held the legs together.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. And the Anderson shelter was a steel metal...
That was the one where you dug a hole, didn't you? And you
That's
put like corrugated iron, like a Nissan hut roof, but smaller. Yeah. And then you were told to put soil on top of it and all that.
Yeah, you could grow grass on it if you wanted.
Yeah, you could if you wanted, yeah. Although they weren't keen on grass then, were they? You had to grow dinner on it. If you're going to grow anything, grow something you can eat. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Oh, hang on. Well, I actually have the answer.
Oh, good.
Yeah. the Anderson shelter and the Morrison shelter were supplied free to people who earned up to £350 a year. So it was, like everything else in this country, means tested.
Means tested.
So it was £350 a year. It was a bit like IKEA. You had to build it yourself when you got it. I hope you got better instructions than you sometimes get there. Actually, that's not fair, because IKEA are brilliant. But £350 a year.
Right.
But if you bought it, it was about £7 for people who earned more. So there you are. So the answer is you're both right.
Right.
So they were free for most people, because £350 a year was a lot of money then, wasn't it?
Oh,
1941. So £350 a year, what's that,
if somebody was earning around £455 a week, which was a good wage in them days...
You got it for free?
Got it for free.
Yeah. £350 a year, very, very roughly, is about £7 a week.
Yeah.
So if you were earning less than £7 a week, you got the Anderson or the Morrison shelter. I don't know how it was decided which you got, but you got one or t'other, or possibly both, for free. There were... 1941, over 500,000 were given out by 1941, November 1941, and then another 100,000 were ordered late in 1943. Gosh. So there you are.
Good number.
Yeah, so if you didn't have a garden, I presume, you didn't have an Anderson, you had a Morrison.
Yeah, I should imagine so.
Yeah, and the man who invented them, I've got all these pieces of information at my fingertips now, of the man who invented them, which I presume was somebody called Morrison, and not the same one as the supermarkets, apparently.
No.
He was, in fact, the Minister for Home Security, Mr. Herbert Morrison, and he designed them, and he got a prize, for want of a better term, of £3,000.
Gosh, which would be a lot of money in those days.
A very large amount of money, but
yes,
if that meant hundreds of people are alive who otherwise would have been dead, then that's worth every penny, you might say.
Good.
So there you are. So they were free to those earning less than £7 a week, and if you were earning more than that, you bought one, and they were about £7 to buy.
Right, thank you very much.
Extraordinary. I'd never heard of Morrison. I'd heard of Anderson Shelter, but I'd never heard of that before.
Oh,
fantastic. I've now got a picture of one, and you're right. It's like a kitchen table with mesh, you know, where the space between the legs, as it were, wire mesh. Presumably the legs are metal, and so if your house caves in, then the table protects you from the falling masonry, and the bits and pieces that would normally break and go all over the place won't get into that shelter. You'll be there in your, well, let's hope it doesn't turn out to be one, but you would have been there in your metal coffin, as it were.
Yeah, could be.
Protected against it. Extraordinary. They were 6'6" long, 4 feet wide, 2 foot 6 inches high, with a solid 18-inch steel, eighth of an inch steel plate on top, welded wire mesh sides, and a metal lath mattress floor. So there.
There. Right.
And you actually got 359 individual parts and 3 tools with which to make them.
Right.
How about that?
Very good.
You are fully informed, and so am I now. That was great fun. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Do you win anything as a result?
Well, I might get to crack in one.
Oh, well, that's worth everything, isn't it? My sister always enjoys that kind of experience, even to this day. Good on you, Marion. Have a good day. Thank you. There you are. The Anderson shelters and the Morrison shelters were free up to earnings of £7 a week. And, right, you'd have thought it was the other way round, knowing our society. You'd have thought they'd have handed them out to the rich for free and let the poor... Mind you, they needed the poor then, didn't they, the rich? They needed the poor to send them to war, or to send them down the mines, or to send them in the munitions factories, so that the working classes could give their lives and their labour to make sure that the rich stayed rich. Of course I hadn't thought of that. It's silly of me.
Mornings sound better with Eamon O'Neill and Diane Oxford.
Eamon and Diane.
I know you've seen a UFO, but you didn't see the people driving it, did you?
Driving it.
Flying it. The thing that pops this thesis for me is that they all look like somebody's made-up vision of an alien. They could be completely different. Look at Doctor Who, they're all sorts of shapes.
Eamon and Diane and you.
My mum every week used to do the pools. She did Vernon's. If she'd have done Littlewoods, she'd have got 150,000. She got 17,000, but in the 1950s, that was a lot of money.
The Station with Eamon and Diane for breakfast.
One of the most popular attractions.
Back tomorrow morning from 6 at BBC Radio Manchester.
Fantastic. 0161 228 2255. I once won £100. It was, well, I can tell you what year it was. 1959. Well, I'm lying, really. I never won £100. It was the Evening Chronicle, which was, I think, a Wigan published newspaper, and they had a rugby league sweep kind of thing, a rugby league handicap competition, and the prize grew week by week. I think it was probably a £5 a week or something, but it grew, and it got up to 100 quid. But unfortunately, the year I won it, there were 9 of us, so we got about 11 quid a piece. Just over 11 quid a piece. It might have been slightly more. I can't work out exactly. I can't remember exactly. But the winnings were about 13 quid. And I bought my first pair of long pants and an imitation leather jacket, and I still had change. Josie in Wigan. Hiya, Josie.
Hello, Alan.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
I'm the Josie with the post office and the shotgun.
Oh, hello.
Yes, there I am. And I've fought more than that. I've fought the Germans.
Have you? Did you win?
The Morrison shelter, Alan.
Yes.
I at that time, my grandma was the one who used to feed the Polish pilots.
Right.
You remember, sometime
Yeah,
ago.
I do. I remember the call. Yeah. It
and
must have been murder. Must have been murder throwing the food up to the planes.
We had a Morrison shelter in our lounge, and I lived in West Bridgeford, which was a spit away from the aerodrome and a spit away from the munitions factory.
Oh, crikey.
So, if you were going to get it, we were going to get it.
Well, quite, yes.
And they were very, very scary.
They were scary?
They were frightening things to be underneath. Because I'm just about big enough to remember. They were dark and scary, and my poor grandma, who was the sweetest love in all the world, was absolutely terrified. And while there were babies of us having to go underneath and sit and listen to the bombs, we always had to take a little jerry pot underneath with us.
Well, of course you did.
But not for the babies.
Oh.
Because for Grandma was so frightened every time the bomb came down, she had to wee.
Well, I think I'd have whittled and all, to be honest. You know, just telling me, I mean, bladder's filling up now, just thinking about it. But,
so they serve a purpose, Alan, very well.
But that'll be the Anderson shelters you refer.
No, that was the Morrison shelter.
Well,
the one that was inside.
Yeah. Well, how were they dark? Because I thought they were open. I mean, apart from the mesh, they were open side.
The legs were very solid iron.
Yeah.
And the top was a complete sheet of whatever it was.
Yeah,
metal.
it was steel.
And you mesh. So it was dark, and especially if there was quite a few of you underneath, all trying to sit together. It was dark, and it was scary. Probably not as scary to the ones who were babies as the ones who really knew what was going on.
It's actually fascinating in one respect, at least, apart from just the history of it. But I remember during the Cold War, which was the war that never was, that I lived through, as it were, as indeed did everybody else. But the Cold War, Civil Defence, do you remember them? The Civil Defence Corps.
Yes.
And they issued instructions on how to survive a nuclear attack. And one of the ways, it seemed bizarre at the time, and frankly it's still edging that way, but one of the ways was that if you hear the 4-minute warning, you were to hide under your table. Because of falling masonry and the like, your table would protect you. And we all thought, all us lefties thought, yeah, right, you know, there's just going to be a bang and that's the end of it.
No way.
You were quite. But it does make sense when you think about it, that here's this this Morrison shelter that they gave away, and that was just a table.
Yes. but it was, well, I don't know whether it was cast iron, whatever it was, but it would withstand blast. We never came to be bombed, but the house on the circus at the back of where we were was razed to the ground. And the poor man stood in his garden and said, of all the houses they have to choose, they have to bloody well choose mine.
Everybody feels that way, don't they?
Do you know, Alan, I sometimes feel that the camaraderie and the help that was given by each to the other in the war, a war might do us good.
Oh, dear.
Well, you know, because we don't help each other, do we? We don't care about each other.
I mean, I have to agree with you in the sense that we appear to be less prepared to help one another than we previously were. Unfortunately, we're relying on a lie.
Yeah.
Because recently released documents point out that actually looting was rife.
Yes.
During the Blitz. Yeah. People didn't help one another. They waited until the bomb had dropped. They got in there first and pinched all their stuff. So it wasn't the great stoic time that it was. I do agree that people were much more willing to take others in. I've just on holiday read a book about wartime France, and it's the story of a woman. She basically kept a diary. She eventually ended up in Auschwitz and was killed, but it's not part of that. The book's not about that. It's just about how the conquered part of France, not Vichy France, the south, but the conquered part, down to as far as I think Lyon, and they were just above that border, and how they dealt with the fact that they'd lost a war at that point. Yeah. France had lost the war. And how people were united in the hate of the Germans and yet were prepared to trade with them, were prepared to work with them. In the cases of women, some of the women, there were only women available. The men were all prisoners of war or dead. But the women were prepared to, some of them, have relationships with the conquerors and the like, and effectively life goes on with all the greeds that entails.
Absolutely. As my father would tell you, he was offered it on a plate as he drove through Paris, liberating Paris in a tank. Tommy, 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 love, love, Tommy, Tommy.
And I bet he tells you he said no as well.
Well, he told us, didn't he?
Good on you, Josie.
Okay, Alan.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay. 0161
228 2255. If you're interested in reading the book I just referred to, I would give you the title and the author, but of course I don't have it. It's 22 minutes past 1. News headlines with Faye Rusco.
The head of World Motorsport, Max Mosley, has won his privacy case against the News of the World, which had claimed he'd taken part in a Nazi-style orgy with prostitutes. A man's been charged after more than 80 realistic imitation guns were seized during a raid in Salford. And the electricity company E.ON says you're wasting power by leaving appliances plugged in and on standby while you jet off on holiday. Manchester's weather warm and sunny, highs of 26 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Let's take a look firstly to cameras on the M56, and I'm afraid that traffic's still looking fairly busy, I'm afraid, on the west and eastbound carriageways. One lane's closed off westbound at the moment between 6 Hale, Four Seasons and 7 at Bowden. Congestion back to junction 5 at the airport because of the full motorway closure that was in place earlier on to enable air ambulance to land. Traffic is looking very busy indeed. In fact, as I say, congestion's back to the airport at junction 5. If you're heading on the eastbound stretch, though, traffic seems to have returned to normal between 7 Bowden and 6 the Hale, Four Seasons roundabout. So don't forget, if you are stuck in these queues on the westbound, maybe you're heading to the flower show and you're wondering what to do, best advice really is to try and find yourself an alternative route or ultimately add a bit of extra journey time on. Don't forget that if you can update me further, why not call in if you can on the travel line, which is 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester. With 2020 traffic through until midnight.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Roy's just sent me a photograph of the Anderson shelter. I'm not sure. I don't know. How do you get in it for a start? Presumably there's a door. Although it looks like an hutch, a rabbit hutch for men. It does. You could lie down in it unless you were taller than 6'6", which probably wouldn't be the right thing. But he sent me a photograph of one, which is fine. and there are two people lying on their backs. They might even be dummies, I don't know. But if you look beyond it, on the top of the table there are teacups and a sort of lace tablecloth, which I'm sure everybody did that. And below it there are these two dummies, safe and sound from falling masonry. And just to give it effect, in the background, the wall against which it stood has a big crack in it, which actually looks like some of the walls in our house now, but that's because I live in an old house. But quite extraordinary. They were strange things, but strange things have to be done, don't they? We were talking about the I suppose we'd call him the Chief Constable-elect, wouldn't we? The so-called new Chief Constable, who actually takes up his post in November. Peter Fye, currently Chief Constable of Cheshire, is going to become Chief Constable of Greater Manchester. And Tony says, read the new police chief. During his press conference yesterday, he praised the noddy bobbies. I know, says Tony, in brackets, and said that he intends to increase their use. Apparently we've had them patrolling our estate for a year or so now, but sadly I've never seen them, says Tony. Well, I've seen them. They operate near us, and I've seen them wandering about, and they look like perfectly nice individuals, to be honest. I've even seen some of them riding round on their bicycles. 2x2, you might say. But there you are. So the Chief Constable, the new Chief Constable, the Chief Constable-elect, says that he will increase the use of them. Whether that means he'll have more of them, or whether it means he'll actually get the ones we've got to do something, he didn't say, or I didn't hear it. David said, we didn't get a personal air raid shelter. In our back-to-back terraced houses, a concrete roof had been laid on top of the walls of the community entry. We in Salford called it an entry. Others called it a ginnel. Oh, I see what you mean by the entry. Yeah, we had an entry at the side of our house. We didn't have a ginnel. And David in Sales says, if we needed air raid shelters during this government's reign, I suspect they would give them free to people who don't have cars and charge the car owner a fortune. This way they could speed up the effect of their policy of claiming the roads back from the rich and powerful by pricing the poorest 20% off the road. On a linked topic, why on earth does the Greater Manchester Future Transport Questionnaire need to ask what ethnic background you come from? I have no idea, David, no idea at all why it is in any way of any interest whatsoever. But the goons who write these bloody forms are obsessed by race. They are utterly obsessed by race. Now, is that because they are racist and they want to prove they're not? Or is it because they've fallen into the trap of saying, oh, we best make sure that the ethnic minorities are looked after? The ethnic minorities don't need looking after any more or less than everybody else. But I only came back yesterday, so I've got my form, I've got my survey, and I've not opened it yet. I've rather more important things to do, such as answering threatening letters from the bank and the like, as one gets when one comes back off holiday saying, is there any chance of you putting any bloody money in this account thing? Anyway, we got all that to deal with, but I've not looked at it yet. But when I do, when I get to my ethnic background form bit, I'm going to put ginger, because I think us gingers are being picked on by the darkies, and I refer to people with dark hair before you start thinking I'm a racist, which you probably think I am anyway, but I'll live with that. But I think us gingers are getting shafted by the darkies, and I think it's high time, it is high time, that us gingers were looked after. I think I should get paid more than all the darkies that work here, because I have to bear being a ginger. And don't get me started on freckles. Exactly, I've got a lot of them at the minute. So, well, they seem to come out in the warm. Yeah. So us gingers have got to take on the darkies and fight our corner. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put down ginger and see where it takes. But no, I don't have an answer to your question. I honestly cannot imagine for the life of me what what effect one's ethnicity will have on the congestion charge, or whatever the hell they're going to call it in the end. It's balmy. Listen, I'm wriggling around in my head, seeing if I can find a reason for it, and I can't. It makes no sense to ask that question. None whatsoever. Puddled. I'm still trying to work it out, is it? Yeah. No, I'm just wondering, could you imagine you turn up, minding your own business, moving along pleasantly, you turn up at the hatch where they take your £4 off you, or whatever it's going to be, and they see you've got a yashmak. Will that be better or worse? Or you turn up in your prayer shawl and your tonsure thingy on your head, your yarmulke. Will you get it cheaper? Will you pay more? It'll be just the same, surely. It won't matter. They won't say, OK, it's Free Jew Day. Go on, Free Jew Day. Or Free Jew Day isn't. We're having a Free Jew Day because it's Friday. And and Saturday, well, Saturday, they walk everywhere, so they'll be clear of it anyway. But they don't want on a Saturday. So it's Free Jew Day on Friday. And then we'll have Free Muslim Day on Thursday. And just because, no, they need to know. And we're going to have a Free Ginger Day on Monday. Because as I've already started my campaign now, it's too late, I'm stuck with it. We're having a Free Ginger Day on Mondays. So that's why they're asking your ethnicity. Yeah. And the Polish, well, they're going to build it, so they get it free all the time, because without them it won't exist, because who's going to build it? There'll be nobody to build it. It used to be the Irish that built everything, now it's the Polish. If you want to build in this country, your name's got to end in ish. Absolutely. Richard, good morning, Richard. Not spoken to you for ages. Richard tells me that Herbert Morrison, who designed the shelter that then became named the Morrison Shelter, was Peter Mandelson's grandfather. Oh, no. That can't be true, because the Morrison Shelter sounds like it was useful, doesn't it? And I can't think of a use for Peter Mandelson. I can't. And the other thing is, now I've seen the similarity, it's all right. What do you get when you get a Morrison Shelter? I'll tell you what you get. You get a box full of air. Exactly. A complete and utter solid outside, nothing in the middle. Well, that's exactly what Peter Mandelson sold us, didn't it? When he mounted that first campaign for Blair. He sold us Blair, who was, well, if you cut Thatcher through, right through the middle like rock, if you cut her through, it would have the city and trickle down written all the way through her. Well, if you cut Tony Blair all the way through, you don't find anything inside. He's one of them lead soldiers. First of all, they melt away in the heat. But secondly, if you break into them, there's nothing inside. Exactly. Well, so the Anderson Shelter, yes, I can see now. I can see the antecedents of it all. And seeing as how we've mentioned the delightful Margaret, Lady Thatcher of somewhere or other, what do we think about that? Because there was a lot of talk whilst I was away. There was a lot of talk about when she finally pops her clogs, Margaret Thatcher has let it be known that she wouldn't be too peed off if she had a state funeral. Well, what do you think of that? Simple question. Should Margaret Thatcher be given a state funeral? And I don't want anybody saying yes, providing it's tomorrow, because that would be just too cruel and unnecessary. And also, I've already had that thought. So should Margaret Thatcher, when she finally pops her clogs, and I hope it's not for a few years yet, but for Margaret Thatcher, should she be given a state funeral? You tell me. 0161 228 2255. Simon in Haywood says air raid shelters were provided free to all households with an annual income of less than £250. Everybody else had to pay. Well, that might be true, Simon, but the website I've just read says 350, and that's £100 difference, which was an awful lot of money in them days. Neil in Bebington, whilst you were over in France, something of France came over to the Wirral in the form of an Airbus 380. Oh, it's a plane. Oh, right. Here's a photo I took. Hang on a minute, you're above it. How tall are you? This painting is taken from above. Crying out, where were you when you took that? Stood on a ladder. Must have been. Anyway, there you are. So thank you for that. It's amazing what people send. And Neil in Bebbington says, one day, with all this genetic engineering, there'll be a cure for gingerness. No, they won't. No, they won't. If it is decided that they will use genetic engineering to deal with gingerness, they'll make everybody ginger.
Lunchtimes belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
And then there'll be no need for a campaign against the darkies. The Archbishop of Canterbury, says Keith, the Archbishop of Canterbury has finally got his way. The British weather has been declared Muslim. It's partly sunny, but mostly Shiite. Very funny. Very, very funny. I like that. Now, no one could be offended by that. And it's too late if they are. Audrey and Gatley is the inventor of the Morrison shelter, the same Herbert Morrison who became deputy leader of the Labour Party in 1945 and granddad to Peter Mandelson. Well, according to our earlier emailer, the answer to that question is yes, but I'm not able to naysay it nor even agree. So it looks like, yes, it was the same person. But in the end, it doesn't matter. It was a good job he did at the time. I think the bishop's stick, David says, I think the bishop's stick is supposed to represent a shepherd's crook. They think all the congregation are, well, just sheep. Ah, well, that's biblical, you see. New Testament. Yeah, because didn't Jesus refer to those who followed him as his flock? So, yeah. And they often depict him as a shepherd. When they're doing pictures of Jesus, they depict him as a shepherd, don't they, with his flock of sheep and all the rest of it. So I don't think it's quite as offensive as you perhaps feel. Or maybe I'm just putting thoughts in your head. So nobody cares about Thatcher then? Nobody gives a stuff. You see, I think she should. I think she should be entitled. Even Blair, although how will decide, I don't know. But even Blair, because they were Prime Minister for a long time, the pair of them. I mean, I don't mean in tandem, clearly, although they had identical policies, obviously. But no, I think she should. And I know somebody, I was having a conversation about this just a couple of weeks ago, before it all kicked off in the papers, and somebody said, but they're reserved for heads of state. Well, they're not. They're not. State funerals are not reserved for heads of state. The Queen Mother wasn't, by any stretch of the imagination, and never was, a head of state. Her husband was for a while, and then she was just his widow. So, no, they're not left for only the heads of state. Winston Churchill, surely nobody, even my dad who couldn't bear the beggar, nobody would deny that Winston Churchill was entitled, and indeed was given, a state funeral, but Winston Churchill was never in this country the head of state. He was only ever, the highest rank he aspired to, or acquired, was Prime Minister, which is not head of state. So no, we have form in this, in giving state funerals to people who are, well, important people who've done what some would describe as a great deal for Britain. And Margaret Thatcher, love her or hate her, Margaret Thatcher cannot be said to have not, by any stretch of the imagination, done anything for Britain. Simon in Haywood, I really hope that Baroness Thatcher is given a state funeral. It's not that I think she deserves this level of respect. I just want to make absolutely sure she's dead and gone. Have a great day. And I don't know how you got my previous email regarding the Anderson shelters, as I'd cancelled it before sending. Well, you see, this is the BBC, and we have ways, we have means, and we're not going to tell you. And Ted in Moston, yes, I believe Thatcher deserves a state funeral. She deserves one more than Churchill, who's become some gold-encrusted hero in the public eye, despite the fact that the man himself was a bit of a git. Well, you might be right in that, but we don't give them state funerals for their personality. She gave Argentina a good thrashing. Little Spaniard wants to steal our land. And she crushed Arthur Scargill. That's Ted in Moston. Well, OK, you must take your own way of looking at it. That wouldn't be mine, obviously, but I think she's entitled one because she was indeed the Prime Minister for a very long time and had a major effect on our society. We ended up with Thatcherism. We ended up with Churchillian, didn't we? So, yeah, I'm afraid that's how it is. So she's got to be entitled to one. She was a major figure in British society. She was a major figure in British politics, and she was Prime Minister for a very, very long time. Now, whether you agree with what she did or not is irrelevant. She faced the electorate, and under our system, it's the only one we've got, under our system, people repeatedly turned out to say, yes, we want her there. She is good for Britain. She is the Britain we want her to be. So, no question, she's entitled to a state funeral. It's 20 to 2. News headlines with Richard Stead.
An investigation's underway after a major fire in Bolton brought the town centre to a standstill. The building housed a hairdresser's, a tanning salon, a stationery shop and a martial arts centre. The News of the World's been ordered to pay Max Mosley £60,000 in damages after claims he took part in an orgy with prostitutes which had Nazi overtones. He sued the paper for breach of privacy, and a man's been charged after more than 80 realistic imitation firearms were seized in Salford. Police and trading standards took part in the operation to target the G3 toy store on Rugby Street yesterday. Manchester's weather warm and sunny, highs of 26 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, if you're travelling along the M56 at the moment, then I'm afraid we're still looking fairly delayed on camera on the westbound stretch of carriageway because of these earlier problems with that accident on the westbound stretch. There was a full closure for a time being whilst the air ambulance landed. Now, it has left, but accident investigation work's now underway, which means that the inside lane has had to be closed off to facilitate that work to take place between 6 Hale Four Seasons and 7 at Bowden. Congestion, I'm afraid, still all the way back to the airport at Junction 5, which doesn't bode well, of course, if you're heading to the Tatton Flower Show today. So if you are heading that way, make sure you leave yourself a bit of extra journey time, really. And alternatively, of course, you can find an alternative route. If you're heading onto the M6, then I'm afraid we're also having reports in of problems on the southbound between 16 Stoke-on-Trent and 15. It seems there's an abnormal load making its way down the carriageway. So again, do take care on the approach to that area as well. Now, if you can update me further, why not get in touch by calling in on the travel line on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester, Sports with Steve Wilde.
Hello, good afternoon to you. Mark Hughes appears intent on keeping the remainder of his Manchester City squad together after insisting Michael Johnson won't be allowed to leave Eastlands. Despite reports of interest from elsewhere, Hughes said he hadn't received any offers for Johnson and hoped he'd sign a new long-term contract. Paul Scholes' plans don't seem quite so long-term. The Manchester United midfielder has said he'll quit football in 2 years' time. Oldham manager John Sheridan has added to his squad with the signing of Kevin Meyer from Southend. The 31-year-old has put pen to paper on a one-year deal at Boundary Park. The Rochdale manager Keith Hill says last year's success has actually made life harder in the transfer market. Despite the club narrowly missing out on a place in League One, Dave Perkins and Glenn Murray were both sold to higher-placed teams.
It's very difficult when you are successful at this standard of football, and with the resources that clubs have got, your better players get pickpocketed from you, and they do want to play at a higher level. And you can't stand in the way, especially when the money's right and there's agents involved, and it's very difficult when a player's head's been turned to turn it back in favour of yourself. So it's something that we have to learn to live with.
Well, let's get to Old Trafford, where play is getting back underway after lunch on day 3 of the match between Lancashire and Hampshire. The visitors are in pursuit of Lanc's first innings total of 357. Watching for BBC Radio Manchester, Chris Malaband.
And Lancashire have got Hampshire in some trouble here. 239 for 7, the visitor. David Bolcom on 6. Dimitri Mascarenhas on 34. That's after a morning session dominated, really, by Dominic Cork. He picked up the wickets of Michael Brown, Nick Poffas, and they took a great catch off Gary Keady's bowling to get rid of Chris Chris Tremlett. The other wicket to fall, Chris Benham, who went for 89, caught by Stuart Law at slip off the bowling of Gary Keady. So well did Lancashire bowl this morning that Law elected not to take the new ball after 80 overs. He's only just taken it now after 102, and Glenn Chappell has been charged with trying to do the damage. Dimitri Mascarenas, the danger man in Hampshire's lower order, as they try and get as close as they can to Lancashire's 357. The Red Rose on top, though, with Hampshire 239 for 7.
So he's been in the wickets today, and Dominic Cork has criticised the England selectors for handing Nottinghamshire's Darren Pattinson his debut against South Africa last week. The Lancashire bowler believes there were more experienced players to choose from.
I think they got the selection wrong. Pure and simple, it was a wrong selection. They had the likes of Tremlett who could have come in, and then the likes of Matthew Hoggard on his home soil. And also Steve Harmison. If you watched the 2020 last night, you know, the guy's bowling at 90 mile an hour. And some guy at the other end named Liam Plunkett who can bowl. Sajid Mahmood here. There was about 6 or 7 players they could have picked, and at the end of the day, I think they should hold their hands up and say they got it wrong.
And despite winning his privacy claim, as you were hearing in the news, against the News of the World this morning, there are still calls from Max Mosley to resign as head of World Motorsport's governing body, the FIA. The former boss of the Minardi Formula One team, Paul Stoddard, says whilst Mosley stays at the FIA, they are completely without credibility.
Andy Crane, live at the Lowry.
An MP has been given the boot by his cheeky girl, Lembit Opik.
The main reason, what the catalyst was, he missed a speech by Gabrielle at the Embassy Club. That's London Embassy Club, not Bernard
Not Bernard's old place. No.
And her understanding of politics, she went, whatever.
Music, politics and comedy.
Maintaining a relationship when you work in Manchester and London must be a tough thing to hold down.
Unfortunately, my kids managed to grow up despite me being an MP, and they still speak to me on occasions. I think in Moss Side they thought I was part of a gang, so
Your Sunday lunchtime mix, live at the Lowry, with Andy Crane. Sunday from noon.
BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. 0161228 2255. I didn't know that story. Just heard it with Andy, that Lembit Opik and his cheeky girl have parted. Was that just a gag, or is it true? No, I can't. No, I can't think why I'm interested at all. But it's nice to be in touch. I've been away. I can't know that. Neil in Bebbington says Thatcher should have a state funeral, but it should be privatised. Oh, come on. That's fair. That's very nearly funny. Of course Maggie should have a state funeral tomorrow, says Stuart. You see, I told you not to do that gag. On account I'd already thought of it. I need new stuff. The old stuff's no good to me. Oh, very good. Roy seems I cut him to the quick with my description of his photograph of an Anderson shelter. So he's now sent me a cartoon. I don't know who it was by, but there's a picture of a chap and 2 ladies, presumably the younger of the ladies is daughter, but maybe he's got lucky. A chap and 2 ladies eating sandwiches. There's some cake. He's a bottle of beer available to them. There's a few cushions, and they're sat in their Morrison shelter. But for all the world, and maybe the cartoon caption said much the same thing, but for all the world, it looks like we're looking at animals in the zoo, in a tiny cage. So how many gags were there about that at the time? One can only guess, but I bet there were lots. And I've been sent an article by Terry, an article from the Daily Mail from sometime last week when the debate was raging in the British newspapers about whether Thatcher should or should not get a state funeral at her demise. And it was an article, I actually read the article whilst on holiday, but Quentin Letts, rejoicing in death, why is the left so full of hate for Margaret Thatcher? Well, Quentin Letts is ostensibly an intelligent fellow, and he ought to be able to work out why the left are so full of hate for Lady Thatcher. No, I'm not suggesting you have to agree with it, but the reason the left are so full of hate for Lady Thatcher is because she was, as far as they're concerned, the exact opposite of their beliefs, and indeed took them on and beat them by every measure you can imagine. Thatcher took on the left and thrashed it. Teddy Moston said earlier that she destroyed the reputation, career and power of Arthur Scargill, which she did. Now, I'm prepared to listen to arguments that he brought half of it on himself by being a half-wit and behaving like a fool and getting carried away with his image and his power and believing he had more power than he had, but who amongst us has not been guilty of that? But the reality is that she thrashed him and the rest of the left soundly. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends, of course, on your, well, first of all, your party political point of view, but also your straightforward political point of view. Yeah, so, yeah, fine, no problem at all. That's why the left hate Thatcher, because she shafted them. A bit like, and I hesitate to use this analogy or this simile, but a bit like Britain and France and Holland and places hated Hitler, because he beat the crap out of them. And why Jews hate Hitler and Nazism. Of course, that's why they hate them. Well, because they won and because they did awful things. Now, in the case of Hitler, he did do awful things, whereas Thatcher did things that only some people think are awful. Mrs. Thatcher says, Dave says, Mrs. Thatcher had her faults, let's make no mistake about that. However, what she did with the country's best interests at heart, although I doubt if she'll get a fair shake from the left-wing Guardian-reading great unwashed of the BBC. Yes, she should have a state funeral. Like her or hate her, she did this country proud, and I'm not ashamed of my admiration for her. So that's what Dave says. Welcome back also. The last 2 weeks... the last 2 weeks have been different without you. Well, that's fair. Different without you is perfectly fair. They're supposed to be different without me. They're different without everybody else. When anyone goes away, they're different. Anyway, thank you for that. But most importantly, you appear not to be including me in the great unwashed left wing of the BBC. And frankly, I've never been so offended by being left out. I don't hurt easy, as you can see. How would they expect to sort out a route with all the street parties that would be taking place? Steve in Fallowfield. That's very cruel. Keith? Oh dear, let's have a look. He sent me an article. Why do people send me articles? Do you think I've got time to read articles when I'm sitting here? But I don't stop. Just Thatcher funeral claims denied. Downing Street said it's not appropriate to start speculating about the possibility of giving Margaret Thatcher a state funeral. Labour MP Rosie Cooper reportedly raised the issue after she understood civil servants in the Cabinet Office were drawing up plans for the occasion. The Daily Telegraph says Tony Blair's political secretary replied, "There are no such plans." Senior Tories claim the stance is an appeasement to left-wing Labour MPs. Well, that's balmy. Of course they've made a decision in Downing Street. Of course they have. And if they haven't, then let's sack them, because they damn well ought to have done. And of course they will say we ought not to be thinking of that right now. It's a bit like pretending that the newspapers haven't, and indeed the electronic media such as ourselves, the BBC and the rest of us, haven't got obituaries written for some of the important people. And I wish it not upon them, but if Tony Blair fell out of the sky with his aeroplane today and was killed, within seconds I would have available to you, once it's been confirmed that he was dead. Indeed, the same applies to David Cameron. The same applies to all the leading figures in our society, including Cliff Richard. Exactly. So if one of them was dead, then within seconds I would have available their obituary. Within seconds we'd have a list of people coming on to tell us everything about them. But most importantly, I would have their obituary. And you really don't think, surely, that somebody starts thinking, oh, blimey, they're dead, we'd better write an obituary. Oh, look, we've finished. It's written now. Indeed, most of the daily newspapers have been, for decades, employing people full-time to, A, write obituaries, and B, to update them on a month-by-month, week-by-week basis in the case of those who are currently in the public eye. That's how it has to be. That's how it has to be. When our former chief constable, well, he was then chief constable, was missing, all the wheels in here and elsewhere started to turn, particularly when it was then suggested that he was dead. All the stuff about him was being put together so that we could bring it to you. That's how it is. That's how it is. That's the world. So pretending in Downing Street that that's not going on is, frankly, silly, but I understand why they're in that position. Stephen Fallowfield says, I agree with this. This is fantastic. Stephen Fallowfield says, Thatcher should get a state funeral, but it should be put out to tender, with the contract being awarded to the lowest bidder. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I can give you a list of names of people who would bury her for nothing. I can even give you a list of names of people who would bury her for nothing, whether she was dead or not. Ace says, coincidence or what? You come back the same time an astronaut said that E.T. was real. It makes me think about you. Are you sure you only went on your holidays? I don't understand that, but I did phone home. Steady. Okay. Neil in Bebington isn't as tall as we thought. Who's he? Yeah, well, fair enough. He says the same about me. But he sent me a photograph of an Airbus A300, which apparently is an aeroplane. Well, I know it is, because I can see it written on the side of the image before me. And he had a picture of the Airbus A300 going over the Wirral. And I said, this picture's taken from above it. Well, apparently it's not. The plane is banking, which I think means leaning over to one side. And, well, he's sent an explanation as well, so I'll read the explanation. Well, to fill the time, really. Neil in Bebington says, the plane was banking very hard as it came around New Brighton. You're looking at it side on. Right. Well, that's fine. That's fine. It's not a bad photo, by the way. You've got a good camera. It's not a Nikon D80, is it? I had one of them nicked. Oh. 0161 228 222. But listen, I've got to find who's got it, and that's all there is to... No, we were burgled in our holiday home. When we were in our holiday home. Not here. Our house sitter fends them off. But in our holiday home, we were burgled. Yeah. Third day in, burgled. Didn't spoil the holiday one jot. And it made it dead interesting, because there you are. I've never been the victim of a burglary before. And because it was a holiday home, they knew it was a holiday home. It was a quick job. In, grab what they can, out. Fair enough. Don't blame them. If you're going to do the job, do it clean, say aye. But they got a load of stuff. They got cameras and credit cards and all that rubbish, which is... You know, it's a bummer, that's for sure, it's a bummer. And then you're insured, so you deal with the insurance and your cards, you cancel them and all that stuff. And then you haven't got any money, because you haven't got cards, because they've gone. They took the money as well, the cash that you do have, they took that. So you've got nout. And then you have to start getting on the phone and getting your credit. This was fascinating, absolutely. In the end, it was actually a moment of some enjoyment, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone, because you end up dealing with the French police as a victim rather than getting arrested, which I've also endured in French, and that was something entirely different. But no, I'm not telling you that. But these three French coppers arrive and come and... Not a clue what they said, other than it looked like somebody had a key, which means they either thought I did it for the insurance money, or else somebody had a key. But they did all that, and we filled in the form, and then you have to go down. You have to go down to... Keith says, do you know who at Radio Manchester has written and databased the Beswick obit? No, I said they only have them for important people when they die. The only thing they've got here is a case of champagne on ice, just in case. Anyway, and she can stop nodding and all. Anyway, the copper comes round, and all you get when you get burgled in France, and I believe it's much the same here, is a couple of days later you get to go to the police station, and they give you a form with a number on it that they've stamped and signed, and that entitles you to, or that provides you with evidence for the coppers. That's it. But anyway, honestly, I wouldn't want to be burgled. I certainly, not by any stretch of the imagination, would want to be burgled again on holiday, because it does cause some inconvenience. But the banks were great. You phone them up, they cancel all the cards, and then I said, well, that's all very well, they ain't got any money. And so then they organised sending cash. Well, I don't think they send it, but arranging for you to get cash from a French post office under the aegis of the Western Union, which was quite interesting. So it's your money, but they arrange for you to go and collect it at a post office. And that was interesting, having that kind of relationship or that kind of interface with the system, as it were. And by the bloody hell, they know about paperwork in France. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a cracker. Ta-ra now.